A little behind. I think we're supposed to start at 10. So that's okay. First off, I'll say thank you for having us today. I don't know who I'm supposed to thank. Sophia is, I think, getting some copies of the materials for everyone. We're having a better attendance than anticipated, so that's awesome. Great job. Thank you. My name is Sean Everest. You don't have this PowerPoint, I don't think, but my name is Sean Everest. I'm Vice President and Underwriting Counsel for First National Title Insurance.
Hi, good, how are you?
Familiar faces. That's always nice. And you,
Sorry.
I have an intro song. I always thought it was more Welcome to the Jungle, but okay. That guitar riff is so great. All right. So anyway, my name is Sean Everest, First National Title Insurance. My email address is sean.everest@fnci. I'm not sure y'all can y'all see that where y'all are at? Sure. If you need me, let me know. I'll give it to you. And myself, I live and work here in San Antonio, but our corporate offices are in Plano, and so like if you call, like my card has a 972 number on it. On my cell phone's 210. So, Reagan, thank you guys for having us.
Thank you for being here today. I appreciate
awesome. I appreciate it.
Good turnout. Way to go, team.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. This is awesome. You know, you never know. Summer, people are grinding hard on selling stuff. So thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, I just want to thank you.
Yes, thank you, Reagan. And so we are First National, just so everyone's not totally confused. We are a sister company of Capital Title. And so we underwrite a vast majority of their transactions, and we do a lot of this kind of partnering for educational purposes and marketing purposes. So that's why, and our logos are kind of similar, and I think they both say like Chad. So that's the relationship. That's why this doesn't just say Capital Title all over everything. But anyway, so I am here today on behalf of First National and Capital Title to talk about minerals. Right, that's the thing that we have here in Texas. You know, maybe you've heard of it, Black Gold Texas Tea, the Beverly Hillbillies. Right, so that's a real life thing here in Texas, and it can cause complications in your real estate transaction. I guess I'll introduce myself. I was born and raised in Texas. I've been in San Antonio since I was about 4, and you know, went to college in Texas, high school down the road at Smithson Valley, went to law school here in Texas. I've been licensed to practice law in the state of Texas for about 15 years. And I would say 99% of that has been doing real estate stuff. Either working out, this is Sophia, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's Capital Title's business development rep.
Good morning.
Bring your contracts, your earnest money, your
checks,
all that stuff. So Sophia will come and get it.
Yes.
So she organized this whole thing, so thank you.
And she helps us behind the scene with our holiday home tour house.
Oh, good.
It's behind the scene because,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
you can always in the forefront.
Yes.
That's where you guys belong.
Yes. So, but yeah, so the vast majority of that 15 years has been doing real estate stuff, either working at oil and gas firms, right? Real estate brokerages like this one, working at title companies, examining title, underwriting. So real estate law in Texas is my jam. So hopefully I can help you guys if you ever need anything. I'm also a problem solver.
Yes, you're a huge asset.
Yeah, I'm not. Did you say asset?
That came out of my mouth.
Yeah,
I was like, I should have
She doesn't say asset. So yeah, I'm a licensed real estate agent too, right? As well as being a licensed attorney. I'm not very good at getting things under contract, but like getting them across the finish line, that's what I do. So anyway, so today we're going to talk about minerals. Can you dig it? That's not obviously words unintended. Oh, this is we do webinars for. I also teach the escrow officers around the state. You know, FNTI doesn't just underwrite for capital. We've got 100 other title companies. You know, Suffolk County abstract and title. Well, escrow officers like you guys need hours to maintain their license, and so we do one where everybody joins on the webinar and teaches. That just ignore that. All right, so the basic idea here in Texas, We have 2 estates, right? Is everyone kind of gets that? We're gonna start off slow. It's cool. All right. So you have the surface estate, right? And that's where the physical improvements that are hanging out at. And then we have the mineral estate. That's the interest underground, oil, gas, lignite, things like that that can be extracted from that estate, right? So we have those 2 estates. And just a little history, we did not have those 2 estates until 1911 or so, early 1900s, right? Why? Because before that, nobody cared, right? So this concept is somewhat new, right? It's a little, but the idea of what's on my property is mine and what's not on it is not mine, that's been around forever. But this concept of having these 2 estates, a surface and a mineral estate, really started developing at the beginning of the 1900s. I say 1911 because that's when Spindletop was drilled. That was the first real oil well, and then everyone was like, light bulb goes off, right? So they start, making a lot of money. People start injuring hard on these things. The general rule is that the mineral estate goes with the surface. Right, so in every transaction that we do here in the state of Texas, you guys are buying and selling lot 7, block 12, random Stone Oak subdivision, right? The minerals are transferring on those deals. Nobody's thinking about it, right? But honestly, it's going, unless it's been specifically reserved or carved out or what have you, which maybe had done before when it was acreage or the development stage. Sometimes those things get carved off, but without that, it's all going, right? You're passing everything you own on to the next person, unless specifically reserved. So it's going with the property. Specifically severed, right? So severed apart. So grant in a deed, a reservation in a deed, I'm giving you all of this 100 acres, but I'm reserving them to myself, half the minerals or what have you. Condemnation, obviously, if the state or the municipalities come in and take your business from you, your interest, they can take that from you. Or you can lease those things, just like leasing a house, right? If you lease a house, you may still own the fee simple, but that leasehold interest, the person living out there has a lot of the possessory rights. You can't just barge in on them. Their rights are determined by contract. So the same thing happens here in a mineral lease. If you've leased your rights out, you're no longer really in control of them to a great extent. Except for whatever terms and conditions you guys can agree to. So, is all my coughing causing you all it seems like, one, is crazy. I've lived in San Antonio a long time. The rain, I always think it's going to take care of my allergies, and it just ends up making it worse. All the cedar pollen, all the oak pollen's getting washed away, but then we got mold. And then 2, it's we go from this year has been especially rainy. It's it rains one day and it's going to be 115 degrees today. That's what make up your mind. I want to go to the lake and not have to worry about the rain. So what about your contract, right? This is really what we're all here to talk about, is on specific deals. And when you get into the farm and ranch and commercial stuff, it becomes a little more necessary to get detail oriented on that. But there was at one point not long ago where the deeds didn't match the contract as it related to the meeting of the minds. People wanted to reserve or not reserve. The deed did not have those reservations, or it wasn't clear. And then all of a sudden, what do you have? Bringing in people like me, lawsuits, right? Because I thought I had reserved them. You're now leasing them. There's a bunch of money on the line because the Eagleford Shale now came up. And this is really specific to the Eagleford Shale. There was in Karnes City, there was a lawyer and a title company and real estate agents where it kind of got funked out on the deeds. It wasn't clear. And he used this real funky language. And so it has come to kind of the forefront around here because of that and those deals that we had going down in the Eagleford Shale. But a contract with a mineral reservation merges at the closing with the deed. It's supposed to all like coalesce at that time, right? So you have this contract, right? And then you have what is another contract, right? A deed is another contract. And so when you put them together, they're supposed to like, fit together as a puzzle, right? Yes, we're reserving half under the contract and the deed should recite that that was a reservation made. And it doesn't always happen. And you can see like, right, you're doing a bunch of deals, you're doing a bunch of contracts. How many of y'all have read the deed thoroughly and made sure there's reservations in there? Raise your hand. Okay. It happens. We're just hustling through. And so reading your contract and matching up with the specifics in the deed are important, right? To see if those things survive the contract, that the merger did indeed happen. And so the point of the moral of this story is if you should always be checking to make sure that those things match. The legal description, the parties, all that stuff that match your contract to the deed at closing, right? So do that. And then two, if you have a mineral reservation, usually everyone's acutely aware of that if it's going down in the deal, right? Like has anyone ever had a deal with mineral reservations going on it? Anyone? Yes. Yeah, someone? Yeah. Does everyone know there's gonna be a mineral reservation if that's the case in the deal, right? Everyone's like, they're adamant about what they're reserving or what they're not reserving. Do we need a search? Do we need, like people are thinking about it. It doesn't just kind of get thrown in there at the last second. So if you have a deal like that, you want to make sure, let's get a draft of the deed beforehand and like make sure that that's indeed the case. Then we can move forward with this transaction. Not let your client, move forward with the closing. But I definitely would make sure, and if you want on your deals to run it by me and say, hey, is this what is, because the language gets confusing on, reserving half of my half or what happens, like you want to run it by me and make sure that that's happening, that's fine. So if you're,
we were able to pull it up and
yeah, we can look at all of it and make sure, and even if you're not closing with us necessarily,
right,
you can't get a hold of someone,
purposes.
Like I said, it's sometimes in the rural counties, they're not real like, overzealous about the customer service aspect of the title industry. And so I get that, but if you need, we will look at it and give you a courtesy. Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll see something about mineral rights on a title commitment, but
Yes.
it's pretty rare. Should it?
Well, story time. So yes, every title commitment should contain, has everyone seen the title commitment?
Yes.
All right. Schedule B of a title commitment. Those are things that say, look, we're issuing a title policy, but these are the specific things we're not going to cover you for. And it's not a part of this policy. So all of them should contain a general mineral exception that says, this title policy does not cover minerals at all. Oil, lignite, gas, and the quote is actually from a Texas Supreme Court case. And so every commitment should contain that. And
But I'm talking about mineral
specific
rights.
leases and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've gotten away from citing those because we have this. So to back up even a little bit further, okay, so in title commitments, in title policies, we're not allowed to make general, broad, sweeping exceptions, right? We can't say all the matters on a survey we're accepting to, or anything that could come up in the record we're accepting to it. We have to make specific, except this easement located in volume and page dated such and such. That's okay. But you can't just say all easements, baby, right? However, we have one carve out for that, and it is for the general mineral exception. And it came about in about 2004, right? And the Supreme Court, this case went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you know what, title companies, y'all are not covering minerals, we get it. So y'all can use this language. It's a general exception. It's the one you get to use. And it's the general mineral one. So since about 2004, 2005, we've included less and less of the specific mineral leases, reservations, et cetera, because we just throw that general one in there. And then it's like, well, we don't really have to worry about the specific ones anymore.
But I'm talking about a statement that says mineral rights are held by such and such person. And I wish that was always there. I know how I have land
men that do
in
that.
my family.
Yeah.
I know what it costs to do that.
Yeah. So
I don't know why that has
Well,
just appeared sometimes.
well, that's why, because the reason being,
Somebody.
well, yeah, as we have developed as a society, we have the population centers have moved to more rural areas, right? There's more developments out in Bulverde and Leon Springs and these places out kind of, and then south of here, Wilson County, Atascosa, there's developments out there. Also, drilling techniques have progressed, right? They've gotten better. And so they have moved closer to the city centers and where people live. Well, in about 2000, late 1990s, early 2000s, there was, similar to the Eagleford Shale, there was a thing called the Barnett Shale west of Fort Worth. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah. All right, so yeah, the Barnett Shale. And it was the predecessor, obviously, the Eagleford Shale. Chesapeake Energy was drilling out there like crazy. And there were a rash of cases came up because people lived in neighborhoods in places like Fort Worth, right? Like real city time. And the Chesapeake came in and was like, we're drilling in your neighborhood. Here we go. And one of the key concepts of the mineral and surface estates are what? That the surface is the servient estate. It's the mineral is the dominant estate. So if the mineral owner wants to come in and plow through, make a road and drill a pad site on your property, you really don't have a lot of say if you're the surface owner, right? However, again, that was the beginning. It was like, look, if we want to drill, we can drill. And you see like the old pictures and old paintings of like no spacing requirements. It's just like rig after rig after rig after rig, right? So that obviously wasn't good for the environment, for the, it threw a wrench in everything, this concept. So we've started to dial that back. You can't drill so close to a homestead. You can't drill so close to the road. You can't drill, right? And so there's all these kind of rules got kind of put in place on drilling, and so the drilling's gotten more sparsely done. And then you had these things like city ordinances. You can't drill inside the city of Alamo Heights or Hollywood Park or San Antonio. Then there's restrictions, right? Neighborhoods, Sono, Hollywood Park, they put in restrictions in place that said no drilling on these properties, right? So title companies got pretty comfortable through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s at not really worrying about people drilling on the properties and us worrying about insuring minerals. It was kind of like just implied or understood until Chesapeake started drilling in neighborhoods where there were city ordinances and restrictions and spacing requirements and all these things. And they were like, we're drilling, that's the highest and best use. And so that case, people sued, that case goes up to the Supreme Court. And in 2004, the Supreme Court said, okay, title insurance, y'all are on the hook for all these because it wasn't clear. And in the consumer protection sense, you should have been protecting or at least advising people, right? And so we got this language about we don't cover minerals anymore. And so we stopped listing leases, we stopped listing mineral ownership, we stopped saying surface estate only. We're off the hook on does that answer your question and to make a long story longer?
I just don't know why every once in a while it's there.
Yeah, well, that's a leftover remnant of a time gone past now.
I think the Fort Worth situation is when TAR came out with the notice about mineral rights. And
Yeah, all that stuff started coming out because it was like before
just
that.
to tell people there's such a thing as
Yeah, and the consumer protection, like we moved from Texas was originally a very buyer beware, you get what you get kind of thing back in the day to now there's all these consumer protection, TAR, they're like looking out for people and they don't run into these kind of problems. And so, yeah, that's kind of the genesis of where that all came from. So now we get the general exception. We don't say any, generally we don't do that, but there are still some old school companies that their procedures haven't like caught all the way up. That's really not that long ago, right? If you're talking about from 2019 to 2004, that's 15 years. If we're talking about from 1911 to now, that's, 108 years or whatever. So for it to catch all the way up, we gotta wait another 90 years or so. But yeah, so is there any questions or comments about that stuff?
Well, what protects them now from that?
I don't know.
If title doesn't protect it, the municipality doesn't protect it, does that mean anybody can just
Yes.
decide I don't need a swimming pool and put a
Yes, and there still are some protections out there for the consumers. The deal with the Fort Worth stuff, and just to dispel this kind of like what I think I see everyone's the oil rigs in y'all's minds going. It wasn't that Chesapeake was coming to drill in someone's backyard, right? That's not necessarily what the deal was. The deal was we're going to drill over here, and it's near your city. It's inside the city. It's in the neighborhood, but it's in a, like, as they all know, neighborhoods get developed. There's acreage out there that is undeveloped, and it's near the phase one of that or whatever. And so Chesapeake was like, we're going to drill in this undeveloped part over here, but it's going to pool all of these. You can pool up to 704 acres on a joint pooling agreement. And so they got these people, like I said, it wasn't that there was drilling going on in their backyard, because you need 40 acres freestanding in order to drill a well. And so it wasn't in the backyards. It was just that, people were like being approached by Chesapeake to lease their lot 1, block 1, Fort Worth subdivision. And they're like, what? Why am I involved in this? And then they're like getting pooled into agreements, and they're hauling drilling rigs out down the street, right, to the other part of the neighborhood. So does that make sense? So it's not like, no, the fear of somebody coming and drilling in Stone Oak, that's not gonna happen. Like, that's just not gonna happen for a variety of reasons, but.
Do they bear any responsibility for the stability of the land and therefore the structure, whoever's drilling? So what if they do something to, collateral damage?
Yeah, no, okay, so, all right, so
Makes my house
so we have all of the background on the lawsuits and the Supreme Court and the title commitments and stuff like that, okay. So someone like yourself was like, the poor buyers out here, who will think of the children? Think of the children. And so who would think of the buyers of real property? My pool, my kids out there swimming. And someone's gonna come in with a big drilling rig, an 18-wheeler, and plop down in the backyard and destroy our pool. Okay, well,
Or call
Texas-
the shade.
yeah. I mean, it's like the quarry right here, right? It goes off at 4 every day. The Texas Department of Insurance then came along and said, hey, that's great. Y'all got okay title insurance. Y'all got a freebie here. You don't have to cover minerals anymore. And you're off the hook for covering the damages from that. The buyers are left with, all they're left with are owners of real property, residential real property. All you're left with is suing Chesapeake or Anadarko or whoever it is, right? You got a lawsuit that you can sue them for the damages that you incurred. Which is that's what makes America great, right? Like we have a system for adjudicating disputes that is typically nonviolent, right? So that's what separates us from, that's what makes us the shining
Would a developer
city on the
have
hill.
any liability there? Because you would think you
Yeah.
want to make sure.
They're getting, because what's happening is they're carving out minerals and
or not.
ownership, and they're getting, if they're leasing it out, they should be getting surface waiver rights or service waiver agreements, or like we're not going to affect the surface, we're just going to pool you guys or what have you. So yes, and in a good plaintiff's attorney is just going to shotgun and bring everybody that's ever been involved in this thing into court. But so aside from that, Texas Department of Insurance said, okay, title insurance, you got off the hook, you don't have to cover minerals. However, we're going to give buyers of real property an option to get an endorsement. We're all familiar with the survey endorsement. Well, there's a whole myriad of endorsements, veritable cornucopia of endorsements that we add on to our title policies, just like safe drivers and whatever other type of insurance you get. They have riders and endorsements to their policy. You pay a little extra money, you get a little extra coverage, right? That's how insurance works. And so there's 2 new endorsements, T19.2 and .3, that are, if you get those or pay for them, or they're pretty nominal, maybe $50, maybe free. If you request them and we give them, then it protects certain surface improvements or gives coverage for it. Those things are damaged from a mineral owner's exercising their rights, then the title policy does cover it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we had this Supreme Court that was like, hey, and we're all running around high five and we don't have to cover minerals anymore. And then the Texas Department of Insurance, through a regulatory agency, has come in and said, look, you have to provide, in a consumer protection sense, you have to provide and offer this type of endorsement so that buyers have some sort of recourse other than a plaintiff's lawyer to cover them for the damages from a mineral owner exercising their rights. Does that make sense?
So it's like a rider?
It's a rider, an endorsement. Yeah, it's an endorsement, but yes, it's like a rider. So you have your freestanding policy, and then we add these extra pieces of paper onto it. Survey, balloon note, if there's mobile homes, like if you think about all the different varieties of, there's home equity loans that we insure, there's extra endorsements for those. And so in that sense, there's an extra couple endorsements that protect surface improvements from mineral owners' use and damage of those surface improvements, right? And I'm pretty good about drawing things off my head. I want to say that the definitions on what are improvements vary on 19.2 and 0.3. That's the difference between those. Like one covers buildings, one covers like shrubs and stuff. And so like, depends on because sometimes there are no improvements out there. So maybe you're only left with the one that covers, roads and shrubs and things like that. Or is it a homestead? And so we need the physical structure to be insured with that right.
I've been
Awesome.
showing ranches in Fredericksburg, and their MLS out there has right there on the report, mineral rights convey or don't
Or don't
convey.
convey.
It's been a while since I've shown ranches around here. I don't
Think it
anybody
says that?
know if Sabor.
Well, and I'm sure they don't, because that was probably a specific request from that. Are they Four Rivers out there? Or are they in their own
Hill Country.
Hill Country or Highland Lakes or something? Hill Country?
No, Hill Country.
Okay. Because the general rule, as we talked about, is that they do convey. And so like,
And they all do out there.
yeah,
They're
and
not
so,
worth
yeah, ain't
it
nobody
all.
drilling in Fredericksburg. Nobody's drilling around here either, right? Like you're gonna need to go a long way through a bunch of limestone. It's not profitable. I can't even dig 1 foot in my front yard without hitting limestone, so. All right, so are we good? I can get derailed, obviously, super easily, so.
So we gotta bring it back. That time.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's enjoying themselves and learning, we're good. All right. So,
Giving him the look.
and really on, somebody has to correct me. All right, so this is all just what we covered, right? There's, if there's no meeting of the minds, if the contract said they're gonna be reserved, the deed doesn't have the reservation, and then we have a lawsuit, like, let's just avoid the lawsuit, that's what I'm saying. Make sure it matches, double check. And like I said, you'll know if the minerals are being reserved because it's gonna be a hot button topic in that particular deal. And so if that's the case, then just make sure, remember Uncle Cousin Shawnee saying, you need to take a moment and double check. So be on the same page. There's the TAR information about mineral clauses and contracts forms, which I believe you were mentioning earlier. Is everyone familiar with that form? Maybe not, but it's out there, that's a number.
It just
there's-
documents you told people
Yeah,
there's
hey,
such a thing
As minerals in Texas, right? I went to the class, here's the deal. So then there's also the TREC addendum for reservation, right? So that's only if the seller plans on reserving that deal. And in our farm and ranch class, we cover that addendum like pretty specifically. But it's pretty simple, it's like seller plans on reserving, use a percentage or a fraction, and then go. Now, when you make reservations, yes, sir.
Do you have to know what's down there before you can reserve it, or?
No, you can reserve it.
In case there's oil or?
Yeah, that's a lot of it, especially back in the day, is that it's taking a flyer. It's like, I have no idea, nobody ever drilled out here, let's reserve it just in case for the kids, put it under trust, and if ever it comes up, then there's the Beverly Hillbillies, and then, so a lot of the reservations are that, it's a flyer. It's, of course, there's production, and it's very important, and we're reserving all of it, like, this has just come with the surface. And so that's the deal there. So if there is gonna be a reservation, you have to use the TREC 104. You don't have to, but yes, you do. Right? Like, just for everyone's sake, this comes up all the time. I teach a bunch of classes. There's always the question of, is this the right contract to use, right? Is it farm and range or is it commercial? Is it unimproved or is it farm and range? And I tell agents, and it's similar to this, like, do you have to use this? No. You could do the whole contract on a napkin, right? Like, you don't, in a theory, right? Now, you guys are licensed and Trek, and so you use their forms, and it's a liability issue, right? Like, you want to use these forms because if it comes back, you're like, hey, I told them we used the form, that was the thing. We weren't drawing it on a napkin, but so you want to use this if that's going down. Yes, sir.
Once the mineral rights are severed from the surface rights, is that forever and ever?
Forever and ever.
Okay,
Amen.
so if it's gonna be reunited at some point in time, there needs to be other documentation that states.
Correct. Yeah, so like say, I own 100 acres and I convey to you that 100 acres and I reserve half the minerals. You go and I'm out here, no drilling's going on, and then you sell it to Sophia. And Sophia's like, you know what? I want to get those minerals back. She would need to come to me and I would have to deed her my half to her, and she would have a merger of all the title and ownership. But it would have to be a deed or a contract of some written agreement where we're merging that back up, right? So that is possible. It has happened. But if that reservation happens and y'all are all conveying it around, I'm just sitting over here with this until the end of time. And there's all kinds of reservations that can be made. You can reserve just royalties, the whole mineral interest, the executive rights, which mean like you're the one that signs the lease. There's all kinds of carving up that you can do on the reservation part.
Sure, this is kind of an off-the-wall what if.
Yes, ma'am.
I own 100 acres, did not get the mineral rights.
Okay.
The person who owns the mineral rights dies without will, without heirs, so.
We can't die without heirs in the state of Texas. It's impossible.
Well, there's no bot, I thought the state took it
No.
over then.
No.
Well, who would get it?
The way the laws of intestacy work in the state of Texas is, if you have children, it goes to your children.
I
I know,
need
I'm gonna
no
explain to you
relatives.
well, no, that's not true. That's what I'm getting ready to do.
Okay.
All right, so if you have children, it goes to your children, right? If you don't have children, right, it might go to your spouse. If you don't have a spouse, you don't have children, it goes to your siblings. If you don't have siblings, it goes to your parents, right? And if you don't have parents, then we move that up to grandparents. If you don't have grandparents, it goes out to aunts and uncles. If you don't have aunts and uncles, it goes out to your nieces and nephews. If you don't have any of those people, it goes up to your great-great-grandparents. And then it goes out to great aunts and uncles. And then great nieces and nephews. And so you just keep moving that up until you find
Somebody.
someone. Yeah. So the way that the state legislature has designed this is that, like I said, nobody can die without it. You're gonna find someone.
Somebody.
Now, I agree
We
with
may
you.
have never known them, but.
Yeah, then I agree with you, and that comes up a lot. People are like, they died without heirs. Technically impossible. So like, you just have to, you don't have kids, maybe, you don't have a spouse, maybe, you don't have siblings or parents, maybe, left alive. You had parents at some point. And so, you just keep moving that pyramid up until you might have to go to Ancestry.com or 23andMe or whatever. And do that. But you do have relatives out there. We're all related in some.
That's
How much effort does one have to go to in order to find that heir that's so many generations separated?
Well, how much money is it worth to me? And I think that would be the answer to your question is, how much are if Chesapeake is out there drilling and it's $100,000 a month worth of oil and gas, we're gonna take a look. If nobody is drilling out there and it's just old barren, caliche and clay out there down in South Texas, maybe it's not worth it for anyone to ever look. So right, it's a cost profit analysis.
Who would be looking? The state? The
Well, probably-
probate judge?
Well, how it usually comes up is, and I've done this, Chesapeake or Anadarko or ExxonMobil or whoever, Humble Oil, they go and identify, they have a big old map, right, of a couple counties, and they're like, this is the play. We've identified through geology this is where the Eagle Ford Shale is. And then they go about and they say, all right, we're gonna drill here. Okay, do we know who owns this stuff? And they send out a group of landmen and say, let's go find who owns this stuff and get leases. And so that's when it comes up, is somebody comes knocking on your door and it's like, hey, we think you own these minerals down in South Texas, and we need you to sign a lease. And then you're like, all right, how much is it worth then at that point? And so that's how it comes up, is somebody wants to drill oil out there. And if nobody wants to drill oil out there, then ain't nobody cares. There's no knocks on the door, and then there's no cost profit analysis to be done. But the second it's been identified on that old map, then people start figuring it out. What goes down. Do y'all want story time part 2? Okay, well, we'll move on then. We can tell the story. But there can be a lot of heirs, right? There was one guy that had like 2,500 heirs.
Wow.
So, right. So, yeah, it's talking about landmen, yes. So like if everyone is familiar with, and it was, what is this, today the 19th or the 20th? 20th. So yesterday was I don't know if it's a national holiday or not, but it was Juneteenth, right? That date was important, why?
No more slavery.
But specifically where?
In Texas.
In Texas. Texas was the last state to emancipate its slaves, right? Good job, Texas. Oh, we
You get it right.
Come on, Texas. Well, so if you draw a line from San Antonio to Gainesville, Texas, does everyone know where that is? North of Dallas and the border with Oklahoma. Everywhere east of that were slave counties. Right, west of that, it became ranching counties, right? If you think about the geography of Texas, right, East Texas is more, gonna have more shareholder type crops, right? And west is like ranching and stuff. You didn't need slaves to run 1,000 cattle, you needed 2 cowboys. That's it. So along the Brazos River, is everyone familiar with the Brazos River running down by Houston? There was, near and around that time when the emancipation took place, there was a gentleman who was a slave and was not a slave any longer after Juneteenth. He went about buying some land along the Brazos that nobody wanted because it's a flood zone, not a big deal. So he bought some, and he got married and had some children. That land stayed in the family, intestacy, all that stuff. Nobody had wills, and it was like, who's paying taxes? It's worthless land down there. It's flood zone. Can't do anything with it. But lo and behold, early 1900s, what happens? Oil and gas along the Brazos. And if you think about oil and gas, it's like lakes and rivers of oil and gas underneath us, right? And so they follow a lot of the rivers and lakes that we see on the surface. The Brazos being one of them. So oil is found on these tracts of land. It turns out that gentleman, while he was a slave, had a bunch of kids, right? Because a part of the slave, one of the more demeaning parts of the slave industry, aside from the whole thing, is a talks on human history. He was, it's a stud, right? It's just like horses and dogs and things like that. That's how it was treated back in the day. And so there was a record of who all his kids were, right? Because it was his owner had kept track of that. And so he had around 2,000 documented children out there from that time before. And so so the laws of intestacy, that you're asking, like, who cares? All of a sudden, somebody cares. We got to find all these people because we're going to be drilling oil out there. And so the cost profit analysis and how many people and where it all goes, you have relatives out there you probably didn't even know about. And so, anyways, that's a little Texas intestacy story about. You have relatives and you may not know them, but they're going to be found by someone if it's
23.
benefit. Yeah, 23. So, all right. So what happens though, in particular to y'all's transactions that are out there in the world, you go to sell a ranch in Fredericksburg or down in Wilson County. they're like, the buyer's like, who owns the minerals? Right? And so the answer is, y'all are asked to be experts about a lot of things all the time, right? Roofing, plumbing, oil and gas, electrical. And so on this, you have to say, you know what? We have to hire someone. So the title company's not gonna do it. We're gonna stick the general exception in there, and you guys are on your own. And so, you're gonna have to say, you gotta hire a professional, an expert, a landman to provide you what's called a mineral ownership report. It's gonna be a couple grand for them to go do this. You know, you could end up with 2,500 people owning the minerals out there on this thing, and who knows? But if it's important to you to be a part of this transaction, then we're gonna have to pay a professional to give us detailed information on who owns. And in a title opinion from a lawyer, for oil and gas purposes, based on a landman's reports, it says surface owner, 100% so-and-so. Minerals, and it starts detailing in who owns and what percentages. It'll have a copy of the leases that are outstanding or have been outstanding on that property. Are they still in effect? Have they expired on their terms? Is there production out there currently? You know, it goes in and details all of that information, and so you can have that information going into the transaction. Yes, sir.
Isn't this expert going and looking at the same documents that y'all look at for title?
Well, yes and no. So, yes, it is the same county courthouse where the records are located. However, our search, what makes a title company unique or special, the way y'all pay us a service is, we have databases, like we have a database that our people search. So you bring us a contract, 123 Main Street, random lot and block. We take that contract, we put it in our system, and then we search that. We have taken the county courthouse records and organized them into a database that is searchable by property. And so we just say, bang. Now, we're not searching back to 1911 every time. We're only going back a couple deeds. And if we go back a couple deeds and it shows that Stewart Title insured this back in 1996, and then it was insured again in 2002, well, then we are not going back any further than 1996. We've got a base file that shows the restrictions for that whole neighborhood and the easements and stuff. And so we're not going back that far every time. The landman is going to go back to the sovereignty, right? When Texas was a republic before it even became a state, because what happened at that time, Texas was story time. Texas was its own nation. It was very poor financially, but what did it have a lot of? Land. And so in order to pay those revolutionaries that fought and bled and died for our sovereignty at that point in time, they were given land instead of money, right? And so almost every single piece of Texas was carved up at that time and given to someone for their benefit. And so from that point forward, we look at that title, everybody in the world looks at that point in 1836 as golden. When the state of Texas said, this is yours, we don't have to go back and see if the Spanish land grant or the English common law settlement laws or whatever. We're like, nope. Texas said, this is yours. That's it. You start there and come forward to now. And then you search every deed, every easement, every conveyance, and then that's the search. That's why it costs a couple $1,000, because you're gonna spend a few days going through every map, everything. And then that report is based on that information. Whereas we're not going. And part of it is because we've been given the green light to not have to worry about those things.
I have a friend with an original deed signed out in Spring Branch, signed by Sam Houston.
Awesome.
Is it likely that it was that kind of?
Yeah, that's called it's not a deed, it's a patent.
I think that is.
Right, so it's like when the state gives you the land, it's a land patent.
It's the ways.
Yeah. So, and it was done, there's all sorts of legal description stuff that's fun too in story time, that leagues and labors and bearers and chains and cigarettes and all sorts of measurements. So yeah, the patents were these giant swaths of land, and then they started getting carved up so that people could have money instead of land. All right, so Trek prevents y'all from giving legal advice. Goes in there. So when the severance does occur, right, dominant, servient, we went over this. You have the right to go out and explore on the surface until the surface owner, double middle fingers, we're drilling. So this is all, we're going over all the things that I've covered in a funner way than just reading it. But yeah, so this is the subject to company does not insure title to and accepts from the description of land, coal, lignite, oil, gas, and other minerals in and under that may be produced from land together with all rights, privileges, and immunities thereto. And then on Schedule B, it's gonna say all leases, grants, exceptions, or reservations of coal, lignite, and gas. We're accepting to all of those things, all leases, all grants, all exceptions, reservations, lignite, oil, coal, other minerals, together with the rights that they have of coming onto your land and all those things. We're like, look, not our problem. So we can there are times where in my career, not that long ago, we can remove this and just list the specific ones, right? That never happens because of the time-consuming nature. And so there was a time I was at a different title company and running things over there, and we were doing a deal. There's a glass building over here, Redland Road in 1604, right? And it was a big, $25, $30 million deal. Their legal counsel was like, no, we have to have a full search and make sure that there are no that we're not going to run into any of these problems. And so at that point in time, it became worth it for us as a title company to send me and take a few days out of my life and go search these things and list them specifically, and remove that exception. And so we could do, we wanted to collect the premium on the 30 million, right? Like if y'all are agents on it, you're like calling me being like, hey, do the search. Like we need this thing to go down. And so I'm like, yeah, we need to do the search because I need to get paid too. And so it can be removed, but on every, 99.9% of the deals, it's going to be there. And we're not budging unless the premium's worth it for us. Which rarely it is. Like I said, you're going to take your smartest people off of other jobs for an extended period of time. It's like, that's going to be worth it to put off all the rules. So, again, like this is the 19.2 and 0.3. So like one of them is for real property, 1 acre or less, improved, intended to be 1 to 4. You can request the mineral and surface damage endorsement, which is I think what everyone's concern was when I was saying we don't cover minerals. Well, like what happens if they destroy our stuff? Well, you can request this mineral, and then we go and look at the title and say, is there production out there? Is there a gas pipeline running across this property? What is the deal? Where are we at? Bear County? Like, I'm not worried about it. Let's issue the T19.2. Like, they're going to be drilling and stuff. But in West Fort Worth, where maybe we're taking a harder look at it, right? Whether or not we're going to issue that endorsement. Because we're in the business of risk mitigation, right? So we don't want to pay claims for no reason. So we're going to look and make sure that our risk is minimal, and we'll add the endorsements. Just like I said, safe driver. Well, if you're not a safe driver, your insurance company is not going to give you discounts or extra coverage because you're not a safe driver. So same thing on 19.2. Like if it's not a safe situation for us, we're not going to be able to give that. And maybe you can find another title company that would, what have you, but we don't have to. Here's the one with no drilling. Like just put one every single place. So we don't do this anymore. Drilling with the minerals and real estate transactions, or dealing with it, can be complicated. Extreme caution. Consult your title professionals and attorneys, and make sure that you guys know exactly what's going on these. Like I said, you're expected to be an expert, but really, like, you want to go to experts and be like, all right, we need to low down on this. Part of the deal on the spacing stuff too, though. Look, I finished right in.
I know, I'm so proud of you. I was looking at you. Gotta keep on track.
Oh, there's an online survey. That's again for the webinar stuff. But on the spacing stuff, though, just on an aside, there's a couple different things on why we no longer do that. Like if you think about, I said the rivers and lakes, like underneath the surface run down there with oil and gas. What they've discovered is, like, if you do this, think of like a Capri Sun, right? Like if you suck super hard on the Capri Sun, what happens to the integrity of the thing? It like all collapses on itself, right? And so the same is true here, where like if you poke a hole in the ground and start sucking out from that formation underneath the ground, what happens? What y'all's concern was like, you're gonna ruin the whole formation for everyone. And so that's a part of the reason why the spacing requirements, you can't like, the Railroad Commission won't let you like just full on open the spigot and just start sucking as hard as you can. Because they're afraid you're gonna collapse the formation, spacing, all those kind of things. There's been a lot of rules put in place on drilling, so it's a little less likely to impede on your deals. But that's one of the things on why we don't do this anymore, because it's like, it just all collapses in on itself. Or underneath there, it just collapses it in general. Maybe it doesn't affect the surface too much, but it makes it impossible for other people to drill, right? So, cool. Any questions or comments? I think we answered a lot of them, but we have a.
You made a statement, you said something like you need 40 acres to drill freestanding, what was that statement?
Yeah. So like on this, so on like the spacing requirements, in order to obtain a permit, because just like building, it's just like a building permit, you have to go to the Railroad Commission in the state of Texas and get a permit to drill. You have to have 40 acres of land in order to drill on that property. If you roll in there and they're like, all right, you got a permit to drill, where are you gonna drill at? You bring in a survey and it's 23 acres, the Railroad Commission's not gonna grant your permit. They probably won't. Like maybe you could apply for an exception or what have you, but the rule is you gotta have more than 40 acres in order to get that permit to drill. So, and again, like I said, like there are some exceptions and carve outs for smaller tracts, but and like I said, spacing requirements too start to come into play. Like if your tract isn't big enough for you to be, you have to be so far from the property line, right? Like you can't go right up to the edge of your property where your neighbors and drill right on top of their deal, right? Because for a variety of reasons. And so the same thing, you can't drill close to improvements. You can't drill, like there's all these like, you can't, if there's a road, you have to be even further away, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, you have to have at least 40 acres to find a spot in there that you can drill according to the rules and regulations of the Railroad Commission. And there's always, like I said, carve outs for all that stuff. But that's the general kind of way that works. And
I was wondering, because we're very often asked by clients, who's a good plumber, who's a good HVAC, how do we find landmen? If they have that question?
You can email Sophia or me or your title person. They should, if you go to your title person and they're like, just blanks, just not answering your call, call Sophia. I have a few CW Lake, ATRI resources. I mean, there's people out there landmanning it up. Now your client might not love the pricing that comes along with this. I can't no promises on that. Or even if they're willing to do it, because sometimes they're like the landmen are like a construction crew. And so you've got 3 or 4 or 5 of them, you've got a team, you got someone that's like leading the team, and they're doing projects. And so sometimes they don't have projects, they're like construction guys, they're sitting around the Home Depot waiting for the next deal to be built.
What's that?
But sometimes they're on a job site and they're building a big thing and they don't have time to come off that job site to do the real estate deal. So yeah, I have a couple names if you need. And Sophie, or we can run some landing down around here and find someone. Like I said, the timing might not be great, the pricing might not be great, but at least you have some names to give your client.
Can you give us can you give us your information?
Yes, and I have a business card too, but my name is Sean, like Sean Connery, S-E-A-N. My last name's Everest, like the mountain. I have stories about all those things too,
He does.
but we're not gonna cover that today.
He does have
So,
cards, but
yeah.
it's better if you go through me because he travels a lot. And, I'm glad you have made time to come out
Well,
here. And
yes,
you're a
thank
busy
you.
person.
Yeah,
It's
so,
easier if I could just, hey, Sean, I need you to answer this
Yes.
urgently. And you're like, okay, Sophia. But, I can't guarantee you'll get it by the same day or something.
yeah. And then we had a couple more questions and we'll be done.
Give us your
The
Yes.
pink, yes, yeah, you want Sophie's information.
So my
Because not only can
information-
she get the answer to that question, but she'll also pick up your check, like, you know what I mean? She's a customer service person. I'm a dummy with a,
I'm the one with the
License.
smiles.
Yes.
And no stories.
so, yeah, you just get the stuff done.
So I pass out the sheet as well. It's basically what we can do, what I can do to help you with your business on the real estate side. And my contact is at mine. I know you guys deal with a lot of business cards and whatnot. So if you ever have a question, please give me a call. We would love to earn your business or an opportunity to handle any of your transactions. Sean?
Well, and, yeah, thank you, Sophia. Thank you, JB Goodwin. Thank you,
Thank you,
Reagan.
Aaron.
Thank you all for
And
being
then-
here. I appreciate it and listening to my silly stories. Yeah, we have some housekeeping stuff though, real quick. And if you have questions, just catch me after class and we'll catch up.
Right, and I know Aaron's having another class right after this.
Yeah.
Who's interested in the CE credit? Because this is a CE credit, for
Yeah,
$10,
do you
for
need
$10.
hours?
And nobody's,
Yeah, we got a couple
nobody
of
will? Okay, so I'm gonna get the form right now, I'm gonna pass it to you. You can make checks out or cash. It's
My friends call me
$10.
Cash, so like, just write in that check.
And we're donating this money to the St. Jude's Hospital.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
guys have checks, please, write it out to the St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
Also, yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
In the words of Judge Bush. Me either. I'm very